Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been pushed to the brink? Have you ever felt like a bomb was about to go off inside you? Like you've been pushed so far past your limit that you swore the next wrong word someone said to you was going to open the floodgates of hell? There have been many albums made throughout the history of music built to capture that energy, to channel it and express it sonically so that it doesn't connect with anyone undeserving of its wrath. The genres of punk and metal have many hallmark recordings built to fulfill this purpose, and in recent times, sound quality has ramped up to the point that the most monstrous emanations of the human psyche can be distilled with crystal clarity. However, back in 1981, a band created an album that is, in my opinion, the rawest, most well-articulated rendition of borderline insanity and rage the music world has known before or since. This is the debut album of seminal hardcore punk band Black Flag, Damaged. In a breath, early Black Flag was a beast built to sound as frenetic and noisy as possible, with the musical dissonance serving primarily as an expression of the psychological turmoil portrayed in the lyrics. That was the key development that this album brought to the table, and one of the main reasons why it is held in such high esteem. It is a trope that has been done to death ever since, but here in its initial form it feels fresh and really unlike anything after it. This is due to the guitar wizardry of Greg Ginn, the core element of all of Black Flag's music, whose carefully chosen spirals of noise would be massively influential to all realms of heavy music, but most obviously to the soloing of the future voice of the punk generation, Kurt Cobain. There is no understating this man's ability to hit all of the right-wrong notes, and his wild playing can lend itself just as well to the more lighthearted party songs on the record as it can to the more psychologically, damaged. Similarly, there is no Phil Anselmo or snarling scary frontman without the overarching influence of Henry Rollins, who initially was a fan that the band scooped out of the crowd to sing for them at a show in DC, but he was so good that they just gave him the job then and there. He was the fourth singer they cycled through when trying to record this album, but when they found him they really struck gold, like he makes the other guys sound as menacing as babies by comparison. And he brings these lyrics to life. Even though most of them were written by the band prior to his arrival, he lives out these lyrics during his performances, and I think with more underlying sensitivity than a performer typical of his genre. You get the sense that emotional pain is the source of his rage. He's not mean by nature, he was made that way. Importantly though, he did entirely come up with the last song on the record, which I feel is the band's magnum opus of their entire career, and is in my opinion the single most exhilarating punk recording ever made. But we'll get to that. As far as the bass goes, it's very chunky and heavy, and the drum playing feels almost robotic and is actually the most reserved aspect of the sound, serving to hold together the chaos being created by the other instruments. The drum playing is also very hi-hat heavy, creating a lot of clatter that adds to the cacophonous sound of the band, making them sound even more unhinged. Actually, you could say that because of the heavy emphasis on the hi-hats and some of the drum patterns and the chromatic scales the guitar is playing, the music is similar in nature to jazz, which is interesting, and this is something the band would explore on later releases. Altogether, this version of Black Flag is a tour de force of violence and twisted up angst and rage, packing an incredible amount of punch for a completely DIY band with DIY production, and this is really a classic formula that would be a blueprint for countless hardcore and metal bands in the future. I will be giving my opinion on Damaged one track at a time, rating each in terms of how I think it fares as a song and as part of the album. The rating system I will be using is the universal Mr. Incredible Becoming Canny to Uncanny scale. I know this meme is super old, but so am I, and I still laugh like a hyena whenever I see this template attached to anything, so I guess this is mainly just for my own amusement. Starting off the record is a classic of the genre, Rise Above, a song that anyone who knows anything about classic punk and hardcore will have heard. This is a certified banger, a riotous song with a shout-along chorus and an anti-authoritarian sentiment, directed toward police brutality in Los Angeles, where the band is from, and referencing the biases and unfair treatment that basically anyone but white, traditionally upstanding citizens were facing at that time. The main guitar riff is an instantly memorable descending power chord progression that will always be nasty. And I also love the deranged harmonics the guitar is hitting in the chorus between Henry's yells of the lyric, "We are tired of your abuse." There isn't too much to say about this track that hasn't already been said though. It's the most well-known song on the record and a classic. I recommend it if you want a surface-level taste of what this album has to offer. However, I will say that the main thing that draws me to this record is how it corrodes from the inside as it goes along. Starting off in relative safety and then delving more and more lyrically into psychotic madness until by the end, it is entrenched in the utter abyss. And I do think a lot of these later songs are more interesting conceptually. A lot of the initial songs are punk standards and more inviting, and we are only getting a small taste here of the darkness that lurks ahead. Moving on to the second song, Spray Paint, which I would call a burst of intensity more than a song. I've heard this referred to as a Nash fragment, and that's what it is. It is a burst of rapid instrumentation and rabid snarling vocals, embedded with the call to spray paint the walls. The hectic brevity of the song mirrors the impulse to indulge in the act it is portraying, to desecrate the crooked establishment and force that your voice be heard through the act of graffiti. It's over as quickly as it attacks you, and for that reason it deserves a brief explanation. Six Pack is next, another classic with one of the most memorable bass intros in all of music. It is the meanest, most guttural bass lick ever, building up until the song explodes out of it. The song after the intro doesn't contain the bass riff, which honestly, I wish they would have found some way to incorporate into the song because it is just so nasty. However, I'm not sure how it would have worked in the song, and I respect the decision just to keep it as the intro. The lyrics obviously are about rampant alcoholism, something Henry would have only sung about early in his career since I know he became straight edge later on. But yeah, it's another banger, pretty funny with lines like, "My girlfriend asked me which one I like better. I hope the answer won't upset her." This would have been a great party song back in the day, and it's a case where the messy and unhinged guitar playing really reflects the content of the lyrics well. Okay, so finally, we begin the descent. What I See. Oh my god, I love this song so much. It is the first hint that things are not what they seem, as you're suddenly struck with lyrics that center on the fear of existence and deeply seated panic related to all of the discomforts of being trapped in a body. This song is essentially describing a psychosis, something I personally had to experience for years, and actually, I used this album as a major outlet while I was going through that time. It was horrifying, and these lyrics express in satisfying detail the state of being disturbed, with the refrain of the song stating the dichotomy between wanting to live and wishing you were dead. There are so many interesting lyrics here that I resonate with so deeply, like "Life's cold and it reaches inside," or "I don't want to think, I'm stuck here and I know it." Meanwhile, the guitars are producing these winding and momentum-building chords, which are less hectic and more contemplative this time around, but still very stressed. And I love Henry's performance on this song. He builds tension in his voice so well, and really sounds like he's working through this string of terrifying and painful thoughts. He ends by repeating the lyric, "I've just got to close my eyes," and it's as if that action lasts a few more songs on the record before he finally breaks down, because after this we are back to the somewhat lighthearted party atmosphere. TV Party is next, a massive shift from the previous song, as if the band is forgetting its troubles. This song is actually in a major key, surprisingly, and it's just a fun song about having some drinks with your homies and watching some good old TV. The whole band is shouting in unison throughout parts of this song, naming off their favorite shows at one point, making fun of the fact that they've got nothing better to do with their lives than sit in front of a box and zone out. Kind of a soft commentary on the lack of necessity in American society. The idea that since all of our former needs and functions as humans are basically taken care of, we can just fall headfirst into sloth and laziness. This song is fun, and the record would be a lot more of a slog without it for sure. There is a great balance in the subject matter on this record that makes it very versatile and colorful. Thirsty and Miserable is up next, another song about hard partying and drinking until you can't even see anymore. This one is specifically related to the nature of addiction and how alcohol is a bottomless pit. If I had to choose one song on the album that makes me want to engage in senseless violence the most, this would be it. The guitars and drums bash you over the head in this song. Every rhythmic pulse makes me enter into a crazier and crazier headspace, and I think that this is one of the catchiest songs on the album too, which explains why it has been so often covered. Henry's voice is especially enraged on this song too, like he is pissed off. And I really love how the drums and guitars are hammering on the main rhythmic pulses on this track to make it so punchy and headbang worthy. Greg Ginn explodes into these small noise solos that breaks in the lyrical structure, which is something he does throughout the record, just like filling up every available space with these blistering little guitar sections. Speaking technically here, I like the modulation of the main riff too during the verses. Raising the key of the riff just brings the whole song into a whole new level of intensity. I would say this is the best rager on the album, if not for a track that will be coming up in a few songs. Next is Police Story, and I will say that I think this one is slightly forgettable compared to the rest of the track list. It's still a good song, but the highs are so high, you know? But it focuses on violence and anger toward the police, who were regularly stopping punks in the street for ridiculous reasons and basically assaulting them when they wouldn't comply with their demands. The guitar here is not as melodically invigorating to me as it is on other songs. The chords being used are more oblique, I guess. And maybe the subject matter being dated is what causes me not to connect with it as much. It can't be applied more broadly to standing up to injustice like Rise Above can, since it is so lyrically specific. Because I like to be open and honest here, I'm never listening to Damaged for Police Story. However, that is just me, and I've heard other people say positive things about it, so hey, maybe I'm wrong. Gimme Gimme Gimme, like the last one, is not a favorite of mine. And this brings me to an important point. Even though I love this record, love it to death, there are very few albums in the history of music that are perfect, if any. So I think it's important to be upright and honest when an artist is not hitting the mark. This song is just perplexing to me. Like, the album has been chock full of these winding and adventurous progressions, and then here we get a song that is entirely just 2 power chords being played back and forth. Not even an infectious 2 power chords either, because I can think of enthralling songs that are made of 1 or 2 chords, but this one just falls flat. Also, I'm not sure why the band starts the song around the middle and then immediately starts over with the intro drum part, only to do another round of the same song. Like, it is very confusing to me. There are lyrics that seem to be about consumerism. There also are lines that make me think it's about addiction, and other lines that make me think of complacency. Maybe it's all 3, I have no idea. It's like a hodgepodge of a lot of content of the first half of the record blended together and diluted. In my opinion, this song is a smudge on an otherwise fantastic record. But now we are back, because the next song is the rager I was referring to earlier. Not just one of my favorite songs on the album, but one of my favorite songs ever, period. Depression is an absolute banger. It is a desperate song, so full of insane angst and energy that I have many memories of just throwing myself around my bedroom, just like being possessed by this song. It starts off with the guitars driving into this pool of sludgy static and feedback, which is still the most effective sonic portrayal of depression that I've ever heard. That noise Greg Ginn makes at the beginning of the song is the essence of depression. It is pure painting with sound. After this, the instruments fly into what I think is the most effective and catchy power chord progression on the album. The song is just on another level. Everything from the wild guitars to the calculated but intense drumming to Henry's animalistic vocals have been amped up to 11. I adore the lyrics. So many expressive lines like, "The situation is bleeding me," and when Henry screams in the chorus, "Depression's got a hold of me, depression is gonna kill me," you believe he's on the verge of doing something crazy. I also love the wordplay in the line, "They say things are gonna get better. All I know is they fucking better." It is just such a satisfying song to put on blast if you've ever dealt with depression and suicidal feelings. This song is the apocalyptic explosion that all of those feelings create. The song ends with this mess of squealing guitars and Henry screaming like he's being pulled to hell, and then it just cuts off. This song is a halfway point of both the album's concept and the track list itself. It has 1 foot in the real world and 1 foot in the realm of a deteriorating mind, which is where the rest of the album will reside. Following that up is the song Room 13, and now we have entered hell. This is a harrowing track, the refrain simply and bluntly being, "Keep me alive." The narrator speaks as if he's going to be cut off from life if he doesn't open up, relying only on the relative warmth he gets from connecting with others to sustain his life, while at the same time threatening to bring them down with him if they don't help him. The speaker is on the brink of collapse, clawing at the fringes of existence itself, and fearing that he's going to be torn away. Henry's performance here feels like his life is in danger. The fear he brings is nothing short of shocking. The guitars in the verse keep sliding upward into these high-pitched frenzies in between the manic vocals, and the grinding distortion on this song feels like it's slowly whittling away your sanity. There's nothing nice about this chord progression either. It is ugly. This is another song on the album that helped me express my psychosis. I felt these exact feelings, and honestly, I don't come back to this song very often because it is so potent and it takes me right back to that place, and it is a scary place to be. But I highly recommend this though if you haven't heard it. There are few songs in music that present a picture of insanity as realistic as this. Damage 2 is the first of the damaged couplet songs on this record. These songs are looser and more free-form than the rest of the record, with more improvisations by Greg Ginn and more lyrical embellishments by Henry Rollins. It's all being held together by a musical refrain that is being repeated every 2 bars, a guitar concoction that is pure steely harmonics and dissonance. I keep referencing the guitar primarily when I talk about the instrumentation because, like I said at the beginning, it's the core element of the music and all the other instruments are written around it to support it, and that is true for pretty much the whole album. Greg Ginn is the mastermind here. I'm not sure to the extent that the vocals are improvised on this track. Damaged 1, I know, was lyrically distinct every time they performed it, but this song does seem to be more ordered. This series centers on the theme of mental turmoil expressed in a variety of ways. Henry starts out by giving a good summary of his situation. Damaged by you, damaged by me. He expresses confusion in the main refrain of the song, and this isn't confusion about, what you're going to eat for lunch. This is confusion about the type of confusion you have when you're considering leaving this earth. He expresses the desire to get rid of his feelings, which are only causing him pain, and then he goes back on that and says he doesn't feel anything. Relatable. He bemoans the fact that his attempts at healing go nowhere and ridicules himself for even trying in the first place. He takes us to some really dark places that he's been, but then bites back and says he's not going to long for a typical vanilla life because he hates that even more than the pain he's feeling. All the while, Greg Ginn is churning out these aching assaults of noise that parallel the aching head of this person who is living in so much confliction. Altogether, it sounds like a downward spiral, and even though I wouldn't recommend putting this on every day, like I did for way too long, I still want to encourage you to experience this song as a piece of art. It is powerful and emotion-packed and feels like it needed to be made. The next track is called No More. just no more. It begins with a single drawn-out bass note that fades off, sounding like the end of the line for someone, just complete doldrums. But then the bass and drums start picking themselves up out of the gutter and building until the song erupts out of it, and you realize that there's still some life left. The song is instead about ending things that are causing the speaker so much pain, and deliberating about what needs to be done in order to heal. The speaker stresses ending destructive behaviors and reflects on his past that led him to this point, stating that if something doesn't change, he's gonna die. The track is aggressive, fast, and lively, and it sounds like the burst of insane need that is propelling the narrator's will to survive. I can't stress enough how desperate all of these songs feel. Like, they're not just necessary. Everything hinges on the condition that they be expressed. Padded Cell is the most manic song on the record. The instrumental is all over the place. Drum fills fling themselves in the middle of the verses, guitars circling above. All of it is barely held together. Pieces of the band are flying everywhere. It is a dizzying experience, to say the least. The lyrics on this song make Henry sound like a lunatic in the streets. Some parts of it I can definitely relate to, feeling trapped in existence. I like how they refer to life as a paradise fraud. Other parts, though, make me think the band is a little bit lost in psychotic cynicism. However, it all still resonates with me, and I love how the instrumentation once again illustrates the imagery being depicted. I think on this song that the band realized how deranged they were sounding topically, so they were like, let's just lean full bore into that. This one is difficult. I think my brain doesn't know how to comprehend it, so it just skips over it in the track listing. Looking at it for what feels like the first time, though, it is an interesting piece of work. Life of Pain is the second to last song on the album, and it has some of the most interesting lyrics in the whole record. The guitars at the beginning spiral out the ugliest arpeggios I have ever heard, and drag them out a bit too long for my taste, kind of like twisting the knife. But once the song picks up, I'm into it again. Musically, it's a pretty straightforward 4/4 beat with consistent punk strumming, although the chords are as nasty and chromatic as a Celtic Frost song. To any of the music nerds who got that reference, I love you. Henry seems to be speaking to a girl at first, who seems to be self-destructing and going down a dark path, but then he seems to broaden his scope and elaborate on overarching injustices of life. I have always loved this idea they bring up on the song of wishing there was another healthy outlet for connection other than people. Like, obviously you can get happiness through things other than human connection, but it seems like there's no way to sustain yourself on those things and live without any human interaction because you'll go crazy. I'm pretty sure that's what they're saying, at least that's how I've always interpreted it. And I've always loved this lyric that says, I can't help the way I feel, and I can't accept what I see, and I just can't stand watching you. Lyrically, one of my favorite songs, musically very difficult unless you are in the most twisted up headspace. Okay, finally, we've arrived. This last song, Damaged One, the finale of the record. Words cannot describe how I feel about this song. I am in awe of it. I'm not sure exactly how it was created, but I am positive it is the result of tons of practice on the part of everyone in the group. What it is essentially is the band just getting Henry on the mic and then having him let loose. No defined lyrics, just raw, unfiltered, spur-of-the-moment emotion. It takes a bit at the beginning for Henry to gain his footing, but soon he is detailing episodes from his childhood, pain that was caused to him at the hands of his father, spitting out gems like, hold out your hand to me, give me your hand, and I'll bite it off. He sounds like an abused animal let out of his cage, gnashing and tearing at anything he can get his hands on. Meanwhile, the guitars in the background are just playing a loop of the densest, most dissonant chords you can imagine, crunching along with the beating drums to this onslaught of emotional turmoil. I remember back when I was in a band, I showed this song to our guitarist, and he was mesmerized by what the guitar was doing. Some of the most expressive playing I've ever heard on a song, and the way the instruments react to what Henry is saying on the fly is nothing short of incredible. Then at the end, the most incredible end of the album, all the instruments cut off at the perfect time as Henry growls, and no one comes in. Nobody comes in. Stay out. This Black Flag record is the greatest album of all time. Thanks for watching, bye.